Well, thank you. Any Bengals fans here in the audience? Yeah, I'm not either. I'm a lifelong Steelers fan. And I had no idea that was going to appear on Monday Night Football last season. And I had just gotten into bed, turned on the TV, saw it, and just about fell out of bed. And 2 weeks later, after the Bengals had lost yet another game, I get a call from the head coach, Marvin Lewis. He says, Mike, the team's not doing so well. Will you come talk to us? And I remember thinking, I'm going into enemy territory, but it was the highlight of my mediocre life to date, to be able to speak to a pro football team and the ownership. So I went and spoke to them, and lo and behold, this year they're going to the playoffs. They beat my beloved Steelers 2 times, and I'm taking credit for their turnaround. Thank you. But I wrote a second book on leadership. It's called Get Your Ship Together. And I'm working on another one. It's going to be called Ship Happens. If anybody buys that one, the last book's going to be called Ship for Brains. But I'm from the federal government. I'm here to help you all today. And you're probably wanting the world your leadership team was smoking when they asked somebody from my line of work to come here and speak. But, we've got a lot in common in this room. All of us are leaders. All of us are captains of our own ship. And all of us are leading in some of the most difficult business times, that hopefully we'll ever see. And it's tough. And every once in a while, we need to take some time out of our busy lives and stop obsessing over the things that we can't influence. None of us get to pick and choose our store locations. None of us have any input as to what the economy's doing. But maybe we should think about the things that we can influence to make a difference and to create new opportunities. And when I took command of Benfold a couple years ago, it wasn't quite the worst ship in the Pacific Fleet, but we were probably 3rd or 4th from the bottom. And I didn't get to pick and choose my missions. I had no input into how much budget we got. I didn't even get to pick and choose my shipmates, they're assigned to me by the Navy. And I decided to, for the first time in my career, to stop obsessing over things I can't influence anyway, and maybe just focus on the one thing that I do have the ability to influence. And that's connecting with my crew and getting them to realize we're all in this together. If this ship goes down, we're all going down regardless of what our rank is. So what I wanted to do something that I think we had lost our way of in the military, treat our people with respect and dignity. Invest in their training and education and get them to realize, we're all in this together. And what happened was they turned their own ship around, not me. They decided it was in their own best interest to do it. And for our efforts, we got featured in the Harvard Business Review and another business magazine. And the reader response was so overwhelming. I was asked to speak at a business conference in Naples. 1,000 business leaders from around the country were coming to this 2-day conference. And the problem was I had never spoken in public before. And I figured I was going to be a breakout speaker, speaking to 30 or 40 of the 1,000 people in attendance. And I get to Naples and I looked at the program for the first time to discover that over the 2-day conference, there would be just 3 keynote speakers. The first one was the guy who founded Visa. The second one was a guy by the name of Tom Peters, who gets paid $100,000 a speech and has a private jet to take him there. And the third keynote speaker was the schmuck from the U.S. Navy, who paid his own way on Southwest Airlines to get there. And I was so nervous, I got no sleep the night before. I get up after Tom Peters, I'm nervous, I'm intimidated. 20 seconds into my speech, a lady in the front row got up and made a very visible display of walking out on me. And sweat just started pouring off my face because I couldn't believe I'd be that lousy that soon, that people were already leaving. But I stumbled through the rest of the speech, and I met this lady at O'Hare Airport 4 months later. And she came up to me and said, "You may not remember me, but I was the lady who got up and walked out on you at your first speech." And I said to her, "Lady, I'm never going to forget you." And she said, "I need to tell you why I left." She says, "I'm from Berkeley, California, and I hate the U.S. military." And she said, "I didn't think there was anything I could possibly learn from anybody in your line of work. So I was going to go do voicemails and emails." She said, "But what you don't know is by the time I got to the exit, I realized I faced the same challenge that you face. That yeah, I can order my people around, I can order them to get a mission accomplished, but I can't order excellence. And the excellence only comes about when us leaders us captains of our own ship, create and lead those engaged shipmates and get them to take as much ownership for the results as we have for it. She said, I turned around, took a seat in the back row, listened to your speech. To this day, 7 years later, we become best friends. Every time I'm out in the Bay Area, I call her up, take her out to lunch, share ideas of things we can do better as leaders. I don't agree with her on much, but she's a wonderful lady to have lunch with. But also after that speech, I started getting calls from literary agents, and they said, you ought to write a book. And I remember thinking, guys from the Navy, we shouldn't write books. But after 6 or 7 agents called, I thought, what the heck, why not? So I called my mom. She was 80 years old at the time. I said, Mom, I'm getting out of the Navy. She says, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to write a book. She said, you don't even read books. But I've gotten a lot of feedback. Clearly being on Monday Night Football is the highlight of my life to date. But about 4 years ago, I get an email from a small business owner. He's got 20 employees. He said, Mike, I'm doing pretty well. Last year, I had $2 million in revenue. He said, the problem is I work from 4 in the morning until midnight, 6 days a week. And he said, a year ago, my sister gave me a copy of your book, and she said, look, you're doing well, but you're never going to be able to improve because there are no more hours in the day in which you can work. She said, you started this business, you know every job, and as a result, you micromanage your people to death. You tell them what to do and how to do it. All you've created are order takers who don't accept responsibility for the results. And she said, if you ever want to hope to grow your business, you're going to have to figure out a way to engage your people better. And before you can do that, you need to make the leap from just being a manager, to being a captain. She said, here, read this book. And he told me as he was reading it, it struck him, the reason why his people were leaving his business every year, he had tremendous turnover, was not their fault, but rather it was his own. And so he told me he went out and bought 20 copies of the book, one for every employee. Every weekend they would have to read a chapter. Every Monday morning, the first thing they did before starting work was to get together and discuss what's in that chapter. Ask themselves, are we modeling these behaviors? Are we treating each other with respect? Are we, looking our customers in the eyes, and being optimistic and upbeat and helpful when dealing with them? And if not, how can we become even better? Well, the day he sent me the email, it had been a year since he finished that project. His revenues doubled in 1 year from 2 million to 4 million. And he said it was because not one of his employees left him. And it was because he made the leap from just being a micromanager to being a leader. And to me, that's what leadership is all about. It's not about being liked. It's about driving results. And I know that's something that each and every one of us in this room is committed to. And that's why it's important we take some time out of our lives and think about the leadership component of what we're doing or can do even better to engage our associates. As I was preparing to take command of Benfold, the ship wasn't doing that well. Not only was performance on the floor, our people were leaving us in droves. A quarter before I took command of the ship, our retention rate was 8%, meaning we were retaining 8% of the people eligible to re-enlist. And I can order them around, but at the end of the day, they're volunteers, as your associates are. And the best ones are always going to have options. And what I wanted to do was to retain my best sailors. So I take command, and I'm bound and determined to turn this around. And I had a sailor who was getting out of the Navy the following week. I call him up to my cabin, and I said, why are you getting out? He said, Captain, nobody ever asked me to stay. And I started thinking, this isn't that tough. This is just about executing simple things extraordinarily well. Invest in our people. Create a work environment where I would want my own family members to come be a part. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Would you want your sons or daughters, brothers and sisters to come work for you in your store? If so, great. If you'd be a little embarrassed, fix the things you'd be embarrassed about. And that's what I tried to do on the ship. And what happened, the crew responded. They turned their own ship around. My last year in command, our retention rate was almost 100%. Also in my last year, we operated our ship on 75% of our operating budget. Returning millions I'd like to be able to report came back to you all, the U.S. taxpayer. Well, we all know how government works. Our reward for saving taxpayers millions was that our budget was cut 25% the following year. But in less than a year, we go from being one of the worst in the Pacific Fleet to being awarded the Spokane Trophy. It was an award started in 1908 by Theodore Roosevelt, given annually to the best ship in the Pacific Fleet. And in years 3 and 4 after I left, Benfold got the award for best ship in the entire U.S. Navy. So they got even better after I left, which I haven't figured that one out yet. But after the Spokane Trophy was announced, I get an email from my admiral. He says, "Mike, congratulations on winning the Spokane Trophy." But he said, "Don't get too cocky and arrogant. When I had command of a ship in the Atlantic Fleet, my ship won the Battenberg Cup, which is the award for best ship in the Atlantic Fleet." He says, "Oh, by the way, to this day, my ship still holds the Navy's record in gunnery of 103.6 out of a possible 105 points. He said, "Until you can beat my score in gunnery, I don't want to hear from you, and I don't want to hear from USS Benfold." Well, I never told the gunnery crew how to do it. I just taped that email to the gun mount. 3 weeks later, went out, shot gunnery, shot 104.4, which to this day is still a Navy record. And I thank you. But I let the gunnery crew write the email response back to the admiral, letting him know what he could do with his Battenberg Cup. You know, I'm not a leadership guru. I'm not an HR expert. You know, I'm a store manager in a 300 store fleet. And I didn't have any great strategy in mind when I took command. All I knew was we were in a place we couldn't afford to be. That if we had had to go into combat, I couldn't guarantee that my ship was going to come out number 1. And as you know, in my line of work, it doesn't pay to come in number 2. And one of the things I never wanted to have to do was to write the parents of any of my sailors telling them, "Your sons and daughters aren't coming home because we didn't give it our best." And so I decided we were going to shake things up. You know, instead of telling people what to do and how to do it, you know, and treating them, you know, poorly, I got them all together, all 310 of them, and I said, "I don't care what your age is, I don't care what your rank is, I don't care how long you've been in this organization. You can come to work every day, you can challenge the way we do business. If you have ideas of how we can do things better, tell me about them. And if I can implement them within the guidelines that I have to live within," and all of us, you know, we all live within guidelines. If I can do it, we'll try it out. If it works, we'll pass it up the chain of command for implementation throughout the rest of the Navy. And slowly but surely, the crews started taking greater ownership when we were listening to them and listening to their ideas. That's how Benfold turned their ship around. It was the crew deciding to step up to the plate. And the funny thing about leadership is there are no born leaders. You know, and there are no perfect leaders. And that's why we need to continue to work each and every day. You know, I know administration is important, getting the paperwork done is important, but every day I would try to discipline myself to have a positive interaction with the crew, to push myself away from the desk, you know, walk the ship and talk to them and listen to them. And with time, I slowly gained courage, you know, to become a better captain.